This is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. I hope you enjoyed this Critical Thought, your daily discussion on game design. Good evening and welcome to today's Critical Thought. As always, thank you to 918 subscribers here on YouTube. If you're enjoying the content, be sure to like and subscribe as we're on our way to 1,000. If you haven't voted yet for the 900 Let's Play, your choices are between a Let's Play of Aquaria, Fez, or Bastion. Leave a vote on any of the critical thoughts, and you have until probably another week before we'll wrap it up. For today's critical thought, you're going to get a 2-for-1 special. We're going to be talking about metagame design and Hearthstone. This is going to be based on today's post, which should be somewhere here right now, about why I've just stopped playing Hearthstone. If you missed it, earlier this week I did a stream and there's a video up now of my attempts at playing Hearthstone and I think sucking pretty badly at it. But I've tried learning Hearthstone on 4 separate occasions and each time it hasn't worked out for me. And before we get to that, let's talk a little bit more about metagame. Chances are if you've played any competitive or online multiplayer based title in the last decade or so, you've probably heard someone say the term the meta. Previously, I used metagame as a discussion of persistence mechanics. You know, items in Team Fortress, leveling up in Call of Duty. But what the term has certainly evolved into and has stuck is essentially a guidelines towards the best ways of playing a game. And metagame, or the meta, is a ever constant battle between the players and the developers. The issue is, as game developers, you can destroy the meta and you can alter it, but you can't set it. Metagame design, or the metagame, is basically picked apart by your competitive and hardcore base. The players who are skilled at analyzing and basically examining every aspect of your game, from the weapons, cards, items, you name it. If there is something that's considered superior, they will find it, and they will certainly make use of it and let other players know about it. And the meta essentially is the current state of the game in terms of what's hot, what's not, stuff like that. So, for instance, in Hearthstone, if, let's say, freeze mages was the new meta, that means as players, you would expect to face a lot more of those types of mages, and that also means that if you're either going to play as one, or you're going to need to design your deck to counter one. And that is kind of the issue with the meta, and why developers struggle against it. Because it makes games very predictable. If everyone knows that, let's say, X, Y, and Z is the best option or one of the best, then where's the choice? One of the things that has kind of thrown me away from watching like competitive StarCraft and competitive strategy games on streams and such is the fact that a lot of the play that goes into it happens when you're not playing it. Coming up with the best build orders, making your best deck. And then it's more about these two plans fighting each other rather than the players. It's one of the reasons why I really enjoy watching fighting games such as EVO each year, because there's that sense of improvisation between the two players. Yes, they may be master at their specific characters, but they still need to read the opponent and make adjustments where need be. Not so much with strategy games or with abstracted based titles, and that kind of takes us into talking about Hearthstone the next minute. With balancing or controlling the meta, you have to be careful as developers when it comes to it. Any change, no matter how minute, can affect your meta. And one of the things we see a lot of developers do is attempt to mix up, shake up, or even destroy the current meta in a variety of ways. As an example of that, in Hearthstone during like the early months of it, one of the most powerful combinations was the Miracle Rogue. This is when they used the Gadgetran Auctioneer, I think that's what his name, to get massive card draw with the Rogue's combination of low cost skills and just wreck the player and get a huge advantage. And what Blizzard did was raise the mana cost up by 1 to basically take it out of that range where it can synergize as well with the other cards. Now, I'm not going to be talking in depth about Hearthstone's mechanics here. I am not an expert player, and I'm sure there are more than enough experts out there who have shared their thoughts on Hearthstone's pros and cons. But for me, and based on the posts that should have been linked earlier, there are three big areas that annoy me about the game. The first one is, of course, RNG. Now, a few weeks ago I made a post about probability and how it is used to spice games up and prevent things from becoming stale, but it requires a very fine touch to get right. If the player feels like they are completely out of control, they're not going to want to play the game. And we see this especially in the CCG market. There is a lot of probability innate into a CCG game. You have your deck, what hand you draw, and then of course the hands and the deck of your opponent. That's four things right from the start that will affect your chances at winning. But then with Hearthstone, they have certainly added in more randomization or more probability based elements with future expansions. There were the Shredders added in Goblins vs. Gnomes, Unstable Portal, I think there's a few more portals. The Discover mechanic that was added, I think, with the Reno Jackson expansion. And these are all ways of basically taking the player's skill out of the equation. It doesn't matter how great you are at Hearthstone if you're just not getting the cards you need, or if the opponent gets a really lucky draw, or random draw from these cards. And another problem with this is that it makes it really hard to learn these games, because how do you know if your deck is good or not if there's randomization at play? You could have just gotten really lucky, the opponent could have just gotten really unlucky, and you'll never know otherwise. Now, some games have tried to mitigate randomization or probability. They may not have random spawn cards or random abilities, or they may give you more ways of controlling your card draw, be it cards that will let you maybe swap out a card, draw additional cards, or even at the start of the game being able to swap out, your starting hand for something different. But especially with competitive based games, you have to be really careful with how probability impacts things. And speaking about competitive based games, that takes me to the second issue with Hearthstone, which from my post I'm fully willing to admit that this is an issue that is kind of in a lot of competitive based games, and that is the lack of mechanic progression. If you've watched previous posts on previous video here or read posts on Game Wisdom, you know I am very much a mechanic or systems kind of progression player. I need to find something new to play. I need to find a new weapon, new achievement, new levels, enemies, you name it. I just need something to motivate me to keep playing a game, or I'm just going to get bored. It's one of the reasons why I find it very hard to play open-ended like exploration games, even stuff like Minecraft. Sorry, I had to take a quick sip there. And with competitive-based titles, in-game progression is pretty much downplayed in favor of optimization. Your 500th match in Hearthstone is going to be the same as your 100th, or your 50th, or your 1st, in terms of rules. You're not going to get to a rank in Hearthstone where all of a sudden, let's say all your cards cost 2 additional mana. That's not going to happen. And the issue that I have with competitive-based titles is that I just don't feel that desire, to go up in ranking, to go up in ladder. I rather try to explore and figure out the best ways to play. And competitive-based titles have a finite limit of that kind of growth. We're dealing with set constants and rules. I know when I play a card in Hearthstone, it's going to react the same way every time. My weapon in Call of Duty is never going to change unless I switch weapons. There's only a finite number of cards in Magic, Hearthstone, or any other CCG. This goes back to the concept of the meta. When we're dealing with set absolutes, it's very easy to figure out what's the best way to play. What are the most superior or most optimized options? Now, one of the things that we have been seeing with at least modern CCGs, which I do like, are more ways of playing the game without going to multiplayer. Duelist, for instance, has a very good challenge system that actually teaches you the advanced play and the advanced rules. Shadowverse has a 8-stage, I guess, campaign for each of the leaders, which also teaches you the philosophy of the class and even walks you through like the basic understanding of how it works. Hearthstone, to be fair, even though I'm not a huge fan of it, I do like what they do with the Tavern Brawls, which are basically matches with unique rules each week. Excuse me, and of course the solo adventures. These are ways of playing the game that aren't directly related to multiplayer, and they're a nice little treat for someone who's tired of playing ladder or ranked matches. And that is one thing that I think is really good, to have those additional ways of playing. But for a lot of competitive-based titles, there really isn't anything else holding you from playing unless you're just going to focus on the ladder. Now, the final one, we better start wrapping this up soon, we'll be here for another 20 minutes, is going back to the meta. And this is where my biggest problem with Hearthstone lies. The meta of Hearthstone, like I said, has been a constant push and pull between the developers and the hardcore players. And the problem is that as the game has grown, it's becoming harder and harder to get into it because of how the meta works. And as an interesting aside, and welcome back. I was going to record a second take of this video, but with 10 minutes already down, I figured let's just roll it and we'll splice these two together. So, finishing up with talking about Hearthstone and the meta design. The issue that I have with Hearthstone's meta is that it's becoming harder and harder to break into the game due to how the expansions are laid out. What's happening is with each new expansion, new rules and mechanics are added to the game. With the Goblins vs. Gnome expansion, they add in like accessory cards that can be equipped to or alter your cards. Later expansions have added in Discover mechanics, cards that play off of or enhance hero powers, etc. The problem is that none of these mechanics are ever shown or available in the starter deck or the original set of cards of Hearthstone. And this creates a very big disparity between new players and older players who have been playing for longer. And the issue is that it's not something that you can just simply get around. Starting when I played the game a few days ago, with my starter deck, I was running into cards and situations I've never even seen of, much less had the means of countering. For instance, there is no real way of defending against Typhoon with a starter deck, or ways of, having your own super strong advantage. And this issue becomes worse and worse with each new expansion, as not only do they add in new mechanics, but they generally focus on one or two of the classes, either improving it or adding in means of dealing with a overpowered combination or build. And in essence, what they're doing is creating essentially a virtual arms race of cards that you either have to get those expansions or you're going to be left in the dust. And the issue, and this is what drives the game very close to that pay-to-win territory, is that it's very hard to get those cards that you need through simply playing the game. The problem, of course, is that there's very little gold that you earn daily through those quests, and it still costs quite a bit to get those cards. Now, going back to the discussion of a meta, what's happening is as more cards are added into Hearthstone, it's pushing a lot of the older cards down and putting them into what's considered garbage tier. Now, the issue is those cards are still being found in the packs. So, not only does it make it hard to get good cards, but you're getting more and more chances of getting cards that just aren't good anymore. And that again makes it even harder to grow and progress. Now, one point I want to talk about that may be considered a little controversial. One of the things that I've seen with a lot of recent free-to-play games is the ability to craft specific cards. You usually need an in-game resource, dusts, vitals from Shadowverse, etc. I am just not a fan of this mechanic, and I don't know if I'm in the minority about it. My problem is twofold. First, I think it kind of betrays the nature of these games. in how you're supposed to be opening up new packs and then getting a new card when the time comes and then seeing how it fits into your deck. When you're just able to craft anything that you want, it tends to put me into this kind of deer in the headlight situation. I have, 300, 400, maybe even more cards at my disposal. How the hell am I supposed to know what's the best card? Usually when you're playing the game normally, you'll get a new card, you'll adopt it into your deck, see if it works, yes or no, and move on. But in this way, it kind of takes a lot of the learning of the game out of the equation. Especially if you can just go online and just copy a pro streamer or a pro player's deck and just buy the cards or craft them yourself. Another issue is that it also takes things further into pay to win. It gives an obvious advantage to the players who have more money to spend, and creates again a positive feedback loop. I have a lot of money to spend, so I'm going to get more cards, so I'm going to disenchant them so I can make the cards that I want, which will make it easier for me to play, which lets me get more resources so I can get more cards, and so on and so forth. And I'm just not a fan of this mechanic, and I'm curious for those of you watching, what do you think about that? Now, getting back to talking more about Hearthstone's mechanics in general, the issue with the metagame as it stands, again, is that it's just going to make it harder and harder for someone brand new to get into the game. If you just stick with the starter pack or the classic pack, you're still going to be vastly outnumbered or vastly outmatched by players, even if they are brand new, who've spent money or were able to get their hands on like bonus promotions of free decks or packs, stuff like that. And it's also affecting the meta of the game as well. Hearthstone again has certainly had its issues with controlling the meta and preventing popular builds from becoming too popular. And I think that's what their general philosophy is with these expansions. They're trying to shake up the meta as much as possible. The problem with that, and going back to my post on competitive game design, is you need to cater to both the casual, there you go, and the core base. If you don't have new players coming in, your game is not going to grow. And Hearthstone as it stands is just not welcoming to new players. It's great for core and expert players because they're the ones who've been winning so long. They know how to build their decks, so that way when a new expansion comes, they can easily buy the cards or buy the adventure and then go at it from there. But for a casual player, it's just one very high wall to get around. And like I said, it's only going to get worse. Right now, they of course are preparing their next expansion, the Mean Streets of Gachatran, which of course is going to add in more cards and more unique rules. And the issue, I think, really comes down to, I guess, the philosophy of what it means to play Hearthstone. Like I said, your foundation of the game, which is the starter deck, starter pack, has none of these options available. You're not going to get a neutral card that will let you do the same things as the stuff in the Grand Tournament, or Gachatran, or the Grand Adventure, or whatever. And to force or to throw all the stuff at a new player is going to really make things frustrating to play. One of the things I did like about Shadowverse, which does kind of have this issue with how its design is, but that's another topic entirely, is the fact that they just give you like a ton of packs to open up right from the get-go. So chances are you're going to get enough cards to build something at least competitive from the start. Same thing goes for duelists. Because of the tactical elements of the game, the card strength is still important, but you still need smart play. But again, that's another topic in of itself. To wrap things up before this video gets any longer, I would love to talk to Wizards of the Coast. I would love to pick their brains about CCG design and balance, because they have been going on for a very long time, and I know they have done some interesting things with, again, controlling and altering the meta. But to wrap this up before we start hitting 30 minutes of video, Hearthstone is an interesting game. I do appreciate and I do compliment the design, but it's just not a game that I think is welcoming to new players. And like I said, I'm up to, or I finished chance number 4 trying to learn it, and I'm just giving up on it. If, for those of you watching, besides Shadowverse and Duelist, are there any other really good CCGs to try out right now? I've heard good things about Elder Scrolls Online card game and Gwent. I think that's what it's called, the Witcher 3's CCG. But if there's any other ones, please let me know, because I may give them a try. And also, what do you think about Magic the Gathering? I've heard some polarizing elements about their recent free-to-play or retail games you can play from them, but I haven't looked at it in decades, or I should say ages at this point, so I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. But we're going to wrap things up here. Sorry for sort of the cut in between there, but when you get on a roll like this, it's hard to recapture the magic a second time. Once again, thank you to everyone who is subscribing here and enjoying these videos. Be sure to check out game-wisdom.com, where I examine the art and science of games. And come back tomorrow for more great content over there and on the YouTube channel. I don't have any ideas for what we'll talk about tomorrow, but I'm sure I'll come with something by then. Once again, I'm Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Have a great night, and I'll see you all again real soon. Take care. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and of course share with your friends. It always helps out. For daily posts on all manner of game design and industry topics, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the site and everything that I do, be sure to check out the Patreon campaign. If we can hit goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy, and I'll be able to support myself and my household. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day and random thoughts from me. And lastly, you can find me on Twitch right over there at GWBycer for daily streams most nights around 10 Eastern. Thanks again for watching the video, and be sure to check out more great content coming to the Game Wisdom channel real soon.